How you all doing? My name is Mr. Rev Comrade Rowley, and I would just like to acknowledge that the land that we're meeting on is of the Gadigal and the Wangal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to the elders both past and present, and recognise sovereignty, treaty, and social justice has never been ceded. Seated. Welcome to CLACCA ULC Home Group Bible Studies. My name is Mr. Rev Comrade Rowley, and I'm a CLACCA ULC ordained transgender male, asexual, forgotten Australian liberation hermeneutic clergy activist. So essentially, today's reading, we're continuing to look through the book of Genesis, and today's reading is primarily going to be focused on Genesis chapter 30. And so it's just the tail end, it's just the tail end of the previous story in relation to the birth of Jacob's 12 children. Children, and in Haran, and essentially, so behind the text, we know that while some versions tell us that it's dated between 850 and 550 BCE. Aboriginal people date it as old as 50,000 years. So when it comes to older text, because it was an oral culture, and they didn't necessarily always keep records of dates and things, it's important to take that into account and count. And while we do know for certain that the author is Moses, it's important to remember that the book of Genesis was written like an Aboriginal Dreamtime story. So it's important to not take this text literally, and treat it as a Dreamtime story for educational purposes, because it's not a historical account by any means stretch, but there is a bit of historical context behind the text. Within the text, we can see this is a continuation. This is a continuation of the birth of Jacob's 12 children in Haran, 11 sons and one daughter, and another son is born in 35, 16 to 18. It's coloured by the barrenness of Rachel and the rivalry of polygamy. He recalling the relationship of Sarah and Hagar. Like Abraham, Jacob is rather passive figure in this domestic tale, although Jacob is obviously fertile. The women are major agents, conceiving, naming the children, and even negotiating Jacob's services. The names of the sons represent the tribes of Israel and are all motivated by the mother's state of mind, and the naming speeches spin elaborate word plays to anchor the names. Only the daughter, Dinah, who is not a tribe, does not receive a naming speech. The overall movement is determined by God's agency in opening wombs. This text is mostly E with J sections in 29:31, 1 to 35. As a consequence, hence, ultimately the story starts off in 31 to 8, regarding Rachel's envy of Leah, recalls Sarah's responses to Hagar's pregnancy, and child, in which the spouse bears the brunt of the spouse's anger. Unlike Abraham, Jacob angrily rebuffs their spouse and points to God's agency. Joseph's calmer response um, to, to their um, um, to their siblings. Rachel adopts Sarah's strategy of granting a partner, their handmaid, a surrogate spouse, so that they may bear upon the knees either a legal idiom or an actual ritual signifying that the baby will be Rachel's legal child. Rachel's naming speeches for Dan and Naphtali expresses their thanks to God and the rivalry with Leah. The rivalry between Rachel and Leah erupts into a direct confrontation between when Reuben discovers some mandrakes, a plant often bought to have aphrodisiac and fertility properties. Rachel strikes a slightly comical bargain. Jacob's services in exchange for the mandrakes and pays the price when Leah conceives yet again. God heeded Leah and not the mandrakes. After the births of Issachar, and Zebulun, with the appropriate naming speeches, Leah bears a daughter and names her Dinah. Dinah, Leah's seventh and last child, figures promptly in chapter 34. The absence of a naming speech or motive for their name is curious, perhaps indicating the lesser family status of status of people, which precludes their ancestry of a tribe. God remembered Rachel as God had remembered Noah and Abraham previously, and God's act of remembrance generally entails salvific actions. So God heeded Rachel and opened Rachel's womb, as God had previously done twice for Leah. Rachel's firstborn child, Joseph, is now Jacob's youngest child. But the youngest will be Jacob's favorite. Jacob conceives two naming. Joseph receives two naming speeches, one from E and one from J, expressing Rachel's thanks and relief and their prayer for another child, which will be fulfilled, but tragically, since Rachel will die in childbirth. Jacob's wealth at Laban. Jacob gains wealth at Laban's expense, and the conflict between Jacob and Laban takes a new turn as Laban the trickster in 23 to 27 tries to trick Jacob again, but is themselves tricked. Jacob regains their status as a triumphant trickster, this time in wholly justified fashion. Jacob's acquisition of wealth is due to their own ingenuity and God's blessing, casting them as the appropriate heir to Abraham and Jacob and Isaac. Jacob's ability to manipulate the multiplication of flocks also shows them to be a master of fertility, as befits the parent of 12 tribes. The story is primarily from the J source, with perhaps verse 44 from the E source. Note that E source in 31:10 to 12 gives a slightly different account of events. In 30:25 to 28, send me away, Jacob's plea indicates that this service to Laban is not yet complete. Laban's greed is not sated, since Jacob has leaned by divination that the Lord has blessed them, because Joseph's divination, Jacob refuses to release Jacob, but relents somewhat by asking Jacob to name the terms. In 30 to 36, Jacob desires to provide for their own household also, and so agrees to continue keeping Laban's flock on the condition that they will receive as wages the sheep and goats that are discolored, speckled, blotted, spotted, or striped, and the black lambs in 32 to 35. According to this arrangement, Laban, whose name means white, retains the white sheep and the black goats, which are their normal colors. But Laban cheats Jacob by moving all the discolored sheep and goats and black lambs to their children's care, so that Jacob has no flock and no wages. Jacob turns the table on Laban by breeding discolored animals from Laban's flock using sympathetic magic. The animals that see discolored rods of wood while breeding will bear discolored offspring. White streaks an echo of Laban's name. See note on 3036. Moreover, Jacob only does this for the strong animals. The weaker ones let's breed normal. As a result, the feebler were Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus Jacob tricks Laban, who had tried once again to trick Jacob, and acquires great wealth. Well, the key passage, the key text, while this continues in front of the text, we can see that there are still continued strong links of the important strings with the struggle for transgender rights in terms of being called by our names and pronouns. That's the first point. The second thing that is important to take into account is that Jacob's prospering at Laban's expense. So prospering at the expense of human life is in no way, shape, or form support for equality. Quality. The fact that in this particular passage, there is an inequality created between the different uh, highlights the fact that prospering at the expense of human life creates inequality. And this particular passage, I think, is an important message for transgender rights to our cisgender counterparts. But it's not okay in any way, shape, or form to maintain freedom of religion at the expense of human life, life of the rights of transgender people, black people, etc. This particular passage is a reminder of. It is not only a reminder of the importance of calling transgender folks by our names, but also, more importantly, it's a reminder that it's not okay to prosper at the expense of the human rights, of transgender people, black people, etc. That's all for now. Thank you very much for this. I know it wasn't very long, but essentially there were only really in this particular passage there were two important points, and so the takeaway from this particular passage is that, one, the importance of calling transgender people by our names is an equal human right, and two, um, that maintaining healthy relationships should never be done at the expense of human life. That's all for now. I will see you at 5 o'clock for Sunday church. I hope you enjoyed this. God bless for now. And that's all. Thank you very much. And oh, one more important announcement. A school of discipleship is coming up in about the beginning. It is coming up in the beginning of July. Essentially, in terms of CLACCA ULC Sunday church, that will still be happening. It will may be done in a live location. It will be done live in a live location. Asian. So for those who can't make it to the School of Discipleship, we'll still be having 5 o'clock Sunday church. But for that weekend, we will be moving home group Bible studies to Tuesday night. We'll be moving home group Bible studies to a weeknight night. Not just for that week. Again, thank you very much for joining us. And I will see you at 5 o'clock. Lock for church. God bless, and that's all for now. Bye.